Hi everyone, welcome back from our bio break. Many of you in the room have stuck with us since bright and early this morning Perth time, so thank you so much. I hope you've had a moment to put some food in your body over the lunchtime. But fear not, we have a very exciting panel 3 coming up, and shortly we'll have a slightly extended break for everyone to catch a breather. Panel 3, which I'm very honored to present, is on influencers in times of crisis. We have 4 exciting papers for us, and I will progress with introducing Ratan Kumar Roy from South Asian University to please join us on camera, share your screen, and take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on whosoever is based on whatever locations. I can feel that, many of you are maybe surviving on cafe. But uh, I was actually, from the beginning, I was listening and I could see that the importance of this conversation. And as in this panel, I'm the first speaker, and that talks about the influencer diplomacy in that time of crisis. So our paper that we have been working, which is based on Indo-Bangladesh cross-border narratives in the time of crisis, particularly because in July 2024, Bangladesh saw a youth-based Gen Z, which is popularly known, Gen Z uprising in Bangladesh, and that has gone through a lot of political transformation. So, as before we go into the case and its analysis, just wanted to give a little bit of context because Indo-Bangladesh relationship is quite a multifaceted situation because it has a long history. Bangladesh born as an independent country in 1971, in which India, as a big neighbor, contributed not only as a moral support but also directly participating in the war, and that continued to remain as a politically significant narrative and discourse in the political development of the country. But not only the participation of India in the 1971 war, but also the land boundary between these both the countries are more than 4,000, and India's integrity, it has 7 northeastern states which India had to access and has to access through Bangladesh. So that is also another aspect where you can see the economic interdependence, and also there are imbalance because if we can estimate the overall bilateral business and commerce is around 14 billion USD, but it is India's export to Bangladesh is almost 12 billion, while Bangladesh can only export to 2 billion. And that asymmetry also continued to remain as a matter of conflict and little bit of discomfort. Particularly the time that we have taken as reference point for understanding the influencers diplomacy is the July 2024. In August 5th, the fall of the government, which was there for 3 consecutive time, more than 15 years. And that was quite kind of supported by Indian government and India. So that also contributed to an anti-Indian sentiments among the within the digital discourse. So with this, if we move into the post-uprising influencers activism, we can see that during this crisis time, many influencers were framing the July uprising, or which is known as July uprising, not only as a national protest mobilization against the government, but also as something which is bringing a lot of anti-Indian sentiment, a lot of banning of boycotting of Indian product. The the consumerism is very high in Bangladesh, not only the media, but also the goods and services. There are also communal discourses because attacks on minority, violence against minority, those are being taken up by Indian media in a big way, that after this fall of the government, Bangladesh is going in an unruly there are mob violences, and all these things are kind of inflamed by Indian media. So many of the influencers came up on digital media and tried to refute those. The fallen prime minister of the government, she took an asylum and refuge in New Delhi, which is in India, and that also created a lot of conflict around the digital discourses. So that followed up to a election in 2026 February, and post-election and before election, pre-election and post-election influencers continue to remain very relevant. So our study actually examines the role of social media influencer in public diplomacy within this context to trace how they have emerged as an influencer party or actor in shaping the cross-border political narrative. And to do so, what we found that the relevance and significance of systems thinking approach for a comprehensive policy understanding and to have a more meaningful understanding of influencer diplomacy in this context. So if we give a little bit of in 1 minute the theoretical trajectory of this study, that there has been a public diplomacy which with the coming of new public diplomacy and digital diplomacy has become quite a sizable number of social media activism, digital activism goes on in both the side of the border, since this is a neighboring country, on the issues of border killing, on the issues of asymmetric relationship, on the issues of India's influence in Bangladeshi politics and supporting the government. So how this understanding of digital diplomacy can be contextualized within this crisis time when the influencer diplomacy becomes potent. And as we are seeing the cases and context, it makes us realize that it is not only the taken for grantedness of the influencer diplomacy, where influencers should be taken as an important or significant individuals for the diplomatic relationship building, but also what are the problems and challenges, because there are a lot of instances, as we have did a critical discourse analysis of the influencers content and their processes, that made us realize that there are a lot of amplification of the situation. There are complexity contribution to the situation. So that's why we try to come up and wanted to see through a systems thinking approach. What exactly has been happening, if we look into some of the contextualized cases also, we do see that, the uh, there are emotive intensity between Indo-Bangladesh, since there is a historical asymmetry and tension, and the influencers role in this continue to complicate the situation, especially the diplomatic relationship. So rather the diplomatic channels utilizing the influencers, they were trying to address the influencers and their role. So many of the Bangladeshi influencers who were very, very influential, they were getting blocked in India. Their pages were getting banned in India, and that gives a very different dimension to our understanding on influencer diplomacy in a neighboring context. So I am not going to give a detail about the influencers that we have assessed, but some of these people are Pinaki, who has been a popular influencer having more than 4 million followers on YouTube. These both the Bangladeshi influencers were actively talking about Indo-Bangladesh relationship for decades almost, but especially for last 5 years. And during the uprising moment, their roles were very, very crucial. But on the other hand, the Indian influencers that we have considered, they are not all the time talking about Bangladesh, but during this particular time, they were trying to give an non-governmental, very personal framing and understanding, and which are of course having their own political biases since they belong to particular political ideology. So this is the Akash Banerjee, who is known as a Deshbhakt in India, and Dhruv Rathi, who is also another popular Indian content creator, but contributed during the crisis time, talking and analyzing and mediating the Bangladesh case to the Indian audiences. So how during this political crisis the role of political influencer kind of contributed to the neighborhood diplomacy context. This made us at least one highlighting point is that there are quite extraordinary reach with limited accountability, and that maybe led us to think about the systems thinking approach that we have put forth, that why a systems thinking approach to understand the neighborhood diplomacy from the viewpoint of influencer diplomacy is required for essentially for reducing the diplomatic risk, and that maybe help us to understand the nuances of the influencers' activities and activism. So, what is this? In 1 minute, maybe I wanted to give an idea of what is this systems thinking approach. So, we have tried borrowing from Donella Meadows' idea of systems framework, which has subsystems. So our five subsystems are the content or the production where influencers are creating content, and the platform is the second subsystem. Both of these have an influence, direct or indirect, on the audiences or viewer. And there is this other two subsystems, diplomatic system or channel, and the civil society. So all of these are interconnected, and only taking one frame or one subsystem does not help us to understand the influencers diplomacy within a neighborhood situation if we don't follow the system as a whole. And the two aspects of it, or the two loops, one is reinforcing feedback loop, another is balancing feedback loop. So we see mostly the reinforcing feedback loop, which can have a vicious or virtuous ways of on impact. We see mostly the reinforcing feedback loop is contributing to this Indo-Bangladesh cross-border influencer diplomacy, but it is often turning vicious instead of virtuous, and maybe one has to pay attention to that. And these systems thinking analysis help us to also recommend some kind of an diplomatic initiative between India and Bangladesh, which would be a systems-informed policy architecture that should have a much more focus on digital governance, which should be coordinated diplomatic engagement, where major media industries or digital media platforms should have been held accountable by both the countries, and to create epistemic commons, which should be bilateral, managed and edited by both the countries, where influencers can actively participate and brought into larger conversations so that we can minimize the risk. So this is where
Right, Ratan, thank
our
you for
start.
this.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I will have to stop you there.
Yes.
I
So
appreciate
with
the
this,
conversation.
maybe I end our discussion here. Maybe we can, of course, talk.
Sure,
Yeah, in future.
wonderful.
Thank you
And
very
for
much.
everyone in attendance, Ratan's details are also on our website if you'd like to get in touch to find out more.
So this is something that kind of overlaps. I won't say overlap, but is what something that Dr. Zoe Hurley was talking about, which is the response of Dubai-based influencers. Now, essentially, what I look in this project is the response of South Asian influencers during this moment of crisis. And I'll just keep it brief because this is very much a work in progress that I just got into like a month and a half back while doom scrolling social media. It employs critical discourse analysis and ethnography to analyze the social media response of South Asian expatriates in the UAE during the recent Iran US war. Consequently, it also examines how notions of home, belonging, and citizenship are reconfigured and resignified. So it is grounded not only in influencer scholarship, but also in South Asian diaspora and Gulf migration study. My work also refers to Neha Vora's work that Zoe cited, as well as Anju Paul, who study South Asian expatriates here in the UAE. So moving on, so this is something that Zoe had been, she had gone into length, so I'll just keep it brief. This whole idea about the Dubai influencer. When journalists reached out to me for comments, the recurrent theme was the Dubai influencer, who's invariably coded as white, rich, and enjoying a sweet tax-free life here in UAE. Of course, as Zoe had mentioned, this is very much, grounded in those familiar Orientalist framing, and it aligns with the predominant notion, the idea of Dubai as brand Dubai, embodied by glitz, glamour, and by default superficiality. But what it also does is it regurgitates the very problematic binary, and this is what anthropologists like Neha Vora have talked about, of that rich expat who invariably happens to be white, European, American, or Arab, and the rich expat and the poor migrant worker who is coded as being from Asia or Africa. So, as Zoe talked about, the Dubai influencer definitely has come under the spotlight in the aftermath of the US Iran war. And she had summarized the media spotlight, especially legacy media. Now, here, what I've put together is a few screen briefs of legacy media headlines. But my question here, and this is what this project also seeks to do, is question and interrogate this hegemonic idea of the Dubai influencer. With South Asian comprising almost 65% of the Dubai population, sorry, of the UAE population. And by South Asians, I mean Indians, Pakistanis, Bangladeshis, Sri Lankans, Nepali. It's not surprising that they are also there in the digital media scape. Now, here are some snapshot of Dubai influencer. As you see, this is very different from the Dubai influencer that the legacy media was focused on. You will see housewives, middle class housewives, documenting the reality of their expatriate lives here in the Gulf. Okay, how you're a housewife in the UAE and also a content creator. Talking about financial literacy. This is very interesting because when you talk about Indian Pakistani women, financial literacy is not something that they apparently is their forte. How to save money in the Gulf, where do you get discounted, groceries? Again, a very very different narrative from what you see in the typical or rather archetypal Dubai influencer. Also, gig workers whose dance reels go viral, like this Talabat worker, as well as migrant laborers posting daily vlogs and cooking recipes after a 12-hour workday. So, coming back to again the social media response of South Asian expatriates during this moment, what does it reveal? Now, during the early days of the crisis, and just keeping in time, I'm not going to play the reels here, or I'll see if I can just play it on mute. So during the early days of the social media response, or early days of the conflict, it was very common to see South Asian expatriates um, post reels. I just want to check that you can see my slides, right?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, in the very early days of the conflict, it was very common to see South Asian expatriates posting reels that they are on the phone with their family and friends in India, and they're reassuring them that everything is fine, we are safe, don't worry, the UAE government is taking care of us. But what we also see is how they assume the role of fact checkers, counteracting the negative hyperbole of Indian news channels. So, I'm just going to play this reel on mute. So here are snippets of Indian news coverage of how Burj Khalifa, the Dubai airport, it's basically decimated, destroyed. And what was a common kind of narrative is then the Dubai influencer posting these. And this is again shot usually in downtown Dubai against the backdrop of Burj Khalifa. And she's like, yeah, you say it's destroyed, but look at it. You say Dubai is a ghost town, but we are all here. And it kind of also comes back to what Zoe was talking about, who left versus, who's staying. Okay. And in my larger project, I look at how does this redefine notions of home, belonging, citizenship, etc. Okay. So this was a recurrent theme where you basically had the Indian Pakistani influencers saying, look at Dubai, this is the reality. It's not what the news media is talking about. So this kind of comes back to how we think of citizenship. And in the UAE context, it means rethinking discourses of citizenship beyond the labels of citizens, expats, citizens, UAE locals, expats, so the rich, influential white or Arab expats, and the migrant workers. But also, what it does is subvert the hegemonic notion of citizenship as legal rights. Instead, and I borrow these terms from Neha Vora's work on South Asian expatriates here in UAE, rather imagining citizenship as discourses of everyday citizenship, transnational citizenship, urban citizenship, And interestingly, what I found was it's not just about performing the citizenship here, but rather redefining who gets to perform this. In many instances, you would see female influencers or South Asian, especially Indian Muslims posting these reels. Keep in mind that in the current context of right wing politics in India, these are demographics that don't get to actively participate in the discourses of citizenship. So, again, how does it complicate our idea of home, nationhood, and belonging, where your home country kind of, forecloses your participation while in a diasporic setting, this is where you can really reassert your citizenship or rather your belonging. And this is where we see South Asian influencers coming forward and taking that role of, yes, we will take ownership, we will be perform the duties of a citizenship. So here we see South Asian content creators answering questions and reassuring their audiences, yes, you need to trust only the official source for news. As Zoe mentioned, there are very strict laws regarding content sharing. And here we have South Asian influencers who stepped in and said, be careful, this is what the government is saying. Many a times it was in language in like Hindi, Urdu, Malayalam, so that their specific audiences could, take away the message. Also, why does your windows rattle when there's missile interception? And hey, don't panic buy groceries because remember, the supermarkets are full, thanks to the administration here. So here there are two reels. Again, I'm just going to play one on mute. These were very common narratives. The second one is Shahina's vlog that Zoe also mentioned. So these were again very common threads that here is a South Asian influencer who's looking at the post of, people fleeing Dubai. And then he's like, look at Ramadan street market here in Karama. As Zoe mentioned, Karama is a middle class South Asian neighborhood. And during Ramadan, they have these night festivities. And what's also interesting is that when they are, there are South Asians saying, we've been here for years. This is the reality. So this also defines who is the true resident. Is it the people who leave or rather the ones who've been staying here for generations? As Zoe also mentioned that there are many South Asians who are second or third generation residents here in the UAE. And also what we will see in this is Shahina's vlog where I'm just going to have the sound in the background so that you can hear the Tamil music. So this is something that Zoe talked about, that you have South Asian influencers portraying this narrative of normalcy, continuity. And this is again about staking the claims to belonging. And who has the right to defend the negative portrayal of UAE? And one thing that is very recurrent is reaffirming the faith in leadership. We are all Emiratis here. Now, this was the response of the government as we saw it in billboards, in ads, and here we see citizenship being redefined as belonging and shared purpose rather than legal status. Moving on, I want to talk about this whole
Sorry, Sreya,
narrative.
I hate to interrupt you, but we are at time and I'm so sorry to cut you short.
Sure. How long do I have?
We are 2 minutes past time.
Oh, sorry, I'll make this quick. So there is the narrative of safety and security, and here I bring upon Anju Paul and Kitima Rebel's concept of comfortable transience. The state of enjoying a materially secure life in a country despite lacking a legal pathway to permanent residency and citizenship in that country. And this is we see again and again. In their ethnographic study, Paul and Rebel mentioned that they were very surprised, not only in the glowing terms that their participants talked about UAE, but how they didn't want to go back. They wanted to stay back here. They didn't want to move to a Western country. Neither did they want to go back to their home country. And you see some, I'm not going to play the reels, but you see the snapshots here, the post and reels. And the constant emphasis is that this is safe. In fact, it's much safer than, being here in Dubai with missiles flying overhead, as one of the posts mentioned, than walking in Delhi at 9 past 9 p.m. because they're
Thank you,
listening
Shreya.
notoriously
I'm so
well.
sorry to have to
Yeah,
interrupt you
no
and to
worries.
wrap now.
Yeah.
For those of us who would like
So
to follow along, we can follow
sure.
up on Shreya's details on the event website. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
Yeah, so greetings everyone. This is Dr. Zainab Minhaj from MGM University, and today I'll be addressing the topic Fake Dissent in the Digital Age, a qualitative study of the influencers, performative indigeneity, and statecraft during US Israel Iran conflict. We are here to discuss a war that wasn't just fought with hypersonic missiles and drones, but with hashtags and get ready with me videos. In 2026, we saw governments bypass traditional media to fund influencers who could sell a war through the lens of personal conviction rather than official policy. We are looking at the era of influencer diplomacy, where the line between a personal vlog and a state sponsored psychological operation has effectively vanished. We saw influencers in silk pajamas, sipping lattes in Los Angeles or London, speaking perfect, unaccented English, telling us with tears in their eyes that their sisters in Tehran were waiting for American liberation. At the heart of this is a deceptive practice called astroturfing. In the digital age, this refers to state funded campaigns designed to look like spontaneous grassroots movements. It's fake grass, an artificial public consensus manufactured to justify military intervention. AstroTurfing always has a call to action. Real grassroots movements are messy, localized, and often lack a clear Western friendly solution. State sponsored influencer diplomacy is different. It is remarkably polished. The most insidious tool we have observed here is fictionalized indigeneity. This involves enlisting influencers of Iranian descent living in the West to act as authentic voices for the people inside Iran. They mimic the life and pain of those inside Iran to provide moral cover for external military aggression. How it was used against Iran. Influencers used specific vernacular and indigenous imagery to paint a picture of a nation begging for foreign intervention. They distilled complex geopolitical maneuvers into relatable content, framing the US Israel strikes not as acts of war, but as acts of liberation for Iranian women. By focusing exclusively on state sponsored gender oppression, these influencers built a moral runway for Western powers to land their bombers, positioning the US as the grand liberator. During the lead up to Operation Epic Fury, we saw a coordinated wave of content from figures like Masih Alinejad, Nazanin Bonaidi, and Elika Lebon. Masih Alinejad, while accepting the 2026 Courage Award in Geneva, explicitly demanded international intervention. Bonaidi and others utilized platforms like the Council on Foreign Relations to frame the strikes as something Iranians were looking up to the skies for. These influencers became the faces of a Western savior narrative. They distilled complex military objectives, like the destruction of the Natanz and Fordo nuclear facilities, into viral clips about women's liberation. They used hashtags like Zan Zindagi Azadi to transform an internal civil rights movement into a justification for the joint US Israel aerial bombardment of Tehran. To identify astroturfed content in real time, our first tool isn't a software patch, it's a psychological reset. We must learn to separate the messenger's identity from the message's objective. To understand why this narrative eventually crumbled, we have to look at the data that these influencers conveniently ignored. While the Western narrative portrayed Iranian women as helpless and uneducated, the facts on the ground told a different story. In 2026, Iran maintains one of the highest female literacy rates in the region. Approximately 97% of the women aged between 15 to 24. Women occupy over 50% of university seats and hold significant incumbency in medical, academic, and technological sectors. We remember Donald Trump's address at the onset of the conflict, where he looked into the camera and told the women of Iran, I'm doing this for you. He characterized Iran as an orthodox relic, yet in the same breath, he had to acknowledge that it had become one of the most technologically modern adversaries the US had ever faced. This paradox, claiming to save a backward people who are simultaneously high-tech threats, exposed the cracks in the savior narratives. While influencers were trying to win the hearts and minds of the West, Iran was implementing the Mosaic defense. Mosaic defense strategy is a decentralized military doctrine where the defense is broken into small, semi independent cells across the country. It makes a decapitation strike impossible because there is no single head to cut off. How it helped Iran? It allowed Iran to sustain its internal infrastructure despite heavy bombardment. It forced the US and Israel into a protracted conflict that exposed the falsity of American claims. The US promised a surgical and swift operation. The Mosaic defense turned it into a visible, grueling moral quagmire. As the war dragged on, the savior image dissolved. The world saw that the intervention wasn't bringing freedom, but was instead destroying the very infrastructure, like the hospitals, schools, and educational institutions that Iranian women had built and led. In the end, mainstream global opinion and even segments of the Western media